Sue Racanelli, President of the League of Women Voters of Vermont. The League is a trusted national nonpartisan organization. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. We do not support or oppose any party or candidate. We have two candidates, Scott Beck and Amanda Cochrane, running to represent the Caledonia Senate District in the Vermont Senate, a seat now available as a result of the retirement of longtime State Senator Jane Kitchell. The League is hosting today's forum with the St. Johnsbury Athenaeum for you, the voter, to meet your candidates, to hear what they have to say, and to ask them questions on issues that are important to you. Now I'd like to call Tom McCone, our moderator, to introduce the candidates. Tom is a former English teacher, a principal, and a library administrator who lives in Montpelier and writes commentary and feature articles for several publications. Tom?
Thank you, Sue. Well, libraries, art, and architecture are three of my favorite things. And I've got to say, the St. Johnsbury Athenaeum has it all. It's a great place. Bob, thanks so much for hosting us. It's great to be here. So in a minute, I'll introduce the two candidates. Before that, I'd like to go over the format for this evening. The candidates will each be given an opportunity for a 2-minute opening statement and at the end, 2 minutes closing statement. The candidates agreed that Amanda would do the first statement, opening, and then the closing statement, Scott will go first. We have a lot of questions. We're going to start with 2 questions from the League of Women Voters, and the candidates received the first question in advance, not the second one. After that, we have some additional potential questions from the League and also that people sent in ahead of time. And so we'll use a couple of those. But the main emphasis tonight is to use questions from people here in the audience. We've already received a lot of questions. And a couple comments about that. If you're still writing one, please keep it as brief as you can. And I know you're probably writing in your lap, but try to make it legible. Jez and I were going over a couple of them trying to figure out, I think we know what this is. So, but most of them are very clear. So we'll get to as many as we can. Another comment about one way that this forum is different. If as moderator I were writing all the questions, my obligation would be to write neutral questions that didn't take one side or the other. In this case, the questions, almost all of them are coming from the audience. We've been going through them, and many of them state an opinion, and many of them have facts that not everybody in the room will agree with. I'm going to read the questions as they are. I'm not going to critique the factualness of them or the opinions expressed. So we'll leave it up for the candidates to deal with the questions and for you to take it as you would like to. The candidates will be given up to 2 minutes to answer each question. They don't need to spend the 2 minutes. And if they don't use all that time, we get to actually do more questions. So we have a volunteer in the front who's helping us with the timing to keep us on track. Let's see. I think if I got everything related to the questions in the format. So I'm going to read the biographies, first of Scott, and then of Amanda. These are short bios that the candidates submitted to us for this evening. Scott Beck was born in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, to Brent and Sandra Beck, and joined the United States Navy after graduating from the University of Washington. He is a decorated combat aviator with over 1,100 hours in jets, nearly 300 carrier-arrested landings, and multiple deployments on the aircraft carriers USS America and USS Kitty Hawk. Scott has graduate degrees from the Citadel in math and in social studies education. Scott has been elected to 5 consecutive terms in Vermont's House of Representatives, serving on the Ways and Means and Education Committees, as well as the House Ethics Panel. He is a longtime social studies educator at St. Johnsbury Academy, a 20-year owner of St. Johnsbury's independent bookstore with his wife, Joelle, has served as executive director of Discover St. Johnsbury, and volunteers in keeping aging facilities operational for this community, notably Kiwanis Pool and Fenton Chester Ice Arena. Scott and Joelle live in St. Johnsbury and have 3 daughters and 3 sons, all reside in Vermont. Amanda Cochrane, a mother of 3, lives in St. Johnsbury with her husband, John Racer. She has been the executive director of Umbrella for the past 7 years, leading initiatives to help community members live free from abuse and depression. Amanda is a graduate of Colby College with an MBA from Brandeis University's Heller School of Social Policy and Management. She has dedicated her career to improving lives through increasing the efficiency, effectiveness, and financial management of community-based organizations. She began at WISE in the Upper Valley, addressing domestic and sexual violence, then advanced to leadership roles in various organizations dealing with issues such as child welfare, community development, environmental justice, and more. Under her leadership, Umbrella's revenue has doubled, and the organization has launched new and innovative programming, secured multi-year federal grants, acquired its first property, and expanded violence prevention and shelter programs. A dedicated volunteer, Amanda has served as president of Catamount Arts and is on multiple community boards. Amanda enjoys outdoor family time and is passionate about coaching and basketball. So now we're going to move to opening statements, and we're starting with Amanda Cochrane.
Hello, check, just test there, okay. Hi everyone. When Jane Kitchell asked if I would consider running for her Senate seat, I took a moment to reflect on whether I was ready for that kind of step. My journey in public service began right after college when I started working at AmeriCorps, where I worked at an after-school program at a larger organization similar to NECA in our area. Soon after we were there, our checks started to bounce and the organization actually went bankrupt. My sister suffers from mental illness, and the organization we worked for dealt with mental illness, and knowing that all of a sudden programs would be over and no one would get services was really challenging and really left an impact on me. This experience taught me the vital importance of sound fiscal management and business practices in applying them to the nonprofit sector. This ignited my passion, my purpose, and led me into my career. As you've heard, I have an MBA focused on nonprofit management, and after that, I've been able to be part of teams that have cleaned up brownfields, developed playgrounds, worked on prevention programming around all sorts of issues, including substance misuse and domestic and sexual violence. And I've managed multi-million dollars worth of budgets related to those topics. Today, we face increasing challenges. Property taxes are out of this world. The impacts on climate change, substance misuse, and the housing crisis. We have a lot to deal with. And I stand here today ready to bring my sound fiscal management and innovative solutions to Montpelier. Our community doesn't need more finger pointing or more political divisiveness. It needs action. It requires listening, collaboration, and dedication, qualities that I've been able to refine throughout my career. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Now Scott Beck.
Okay. Everybody working? Great, thank you. Thank you to the League of Women's Voters for organizing this event and the Athenaeum for hosting. And I thank you for being here, either in person or online. Our democracy would be far healthier if more made the same commitment that you are making this evening. Some of you know me, and others are getting to know me. I have served for 10 years in the Vermont House of Representatives, excuse me, and I've been recognized as the Legislator of the Year by my peers with a voting record that was recently determined to be the most centrist. I have worked effectively with senators and representatives from all political parties and regions of Vermont on thorny and complex issues: child tax credit, corporate tax reform, early child care, school choice, student waiting, cannabis, education, financing and governance, pensions, special education reform, and most recently I reformed Vermont's common level of appraisal. And there are many others. Vermonters are struggling on many levels. Housing is scarce and too expensive. Taxes high and squeezing family budgets. Public safety, housing insecurity, people struggling with substance use and mental health struggles place stress on individuals, families, schools, communities, and providers. Flood recovery and resiliency will be costly and imperfect and is related to climate change and our carbon economy. I know Vermont can make significant progress on these issues, but only with a more balanced legislator focused on all Vermonters. Vermonters are special and are recognized for their ingenuity, innovative spirit, and discourse that can lead to solutions that work for all Vermonters. But Vermonters don't have superhero powers. And if we design bad systems or don't fix poorly operating systems due to partisan politics, all Vermonters will suffer. I specialize in reforming existing systems and designing new systems that help all Vermonters, and I look forward to discussing them this evening. Again, thank you for attending this forum. I am excited about continuing my legislative work in the Senate. I look forward to the ongoing conversation about how Vermont can make progress toward being a state that works for all Vermonters. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. This is high-tech repair. Bob is very good at this. Okay, so our first question was given to the candidates in advance by the League of Women Voters, and after I read it, I'll ask Scott to go first and Amanda second. Vermont residents have experienced unprecedented, unpredictable climate events that have shaken confidences that the state and national response can adequately secure the economic and personal future for residents. What more does the state need to do to address infrastructure needs to mitigate and respond to these climate events? Scott?
Okay, thank you for the question, Tom. I'm going to take a little bit of an unorthodox approach to this question because it's probably not a question that somebody would want to ask a legislator. But it will get asked to a legislator, and it will get asked to a legislator that checks in January, if not sooner. And when you're in a legislature, that's what you do, is you make laws. But you have to work with a lot of other people to make laws that are actually effective and have the outcome that are necessary. And sometimes you find out that it's not even necessary to make a new law. So when I look at this question, how would I attack this? Well, first of all, I want to go talk to the Agency of Natural Resources and the Water Research Institute over at UVM. 6 colleges, 22 departments that are working on all aspects of flooding. And they've been working on this for 18 months. They reported back in January. And what they're reporting is really good news, is that the repairs and the changes that were put in place after Irene and after the May storm of 2011, where those changes were made, were really effective last summer and this summer. So I would approach this from a standpoint of, tell me what works, tell me what doesn't work, and do you need anything to do more of what works? And I suspect on something like this, through rulemaking, they might have all the authority they need to do really good work that will help Vermonters get through these floods and not have to go through a really lengthy legislative process that might be so lengthy that Vermonters don't actually get helped because the legislature is getting in the way of people that actually are boots on the ground doing the work. And so, and that's a little unorthodox answer to that question, but I think that's how I would answer it.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda?
Thank you also for the question. You know, I think we all have seen firsthand in our region recently, right, the devastating impacts of unpredictable climate events. And unfortunately, as we all know too well, this is going to continue. We know this. Seeing the first responders, volunteers, neighbors, community groups gather together to work on climate and the most recent flooding has been truly inspiring. And as a senator, and as I would work with my fellow legislators to make sure our state is continuing to take appropriate steps to ensure we continue to be prepared for these unpredictable events. First, I think we need to continue to get smarter. We need to be looking at forecasting potential weather events and using forward-looking data for that, and not necessarily just looking back, because the climate is changing, as we know. In addition, we need to be able to really prioritize projects on the statewide level to ensure that we are addressing the most vulnerable places in our state with green infrastructure and with other strategies that can really help us mitigate the future harm of flood action or flood activity. And we need to work with local partners. We really need to support local municipalities to get smarter, to build capacity, to learn how to become more resilient related to their flood mitigation strategies. And we need to continue to apply or think about more innovative solutions, looking at permeable pavement or other green options to help mitigate funding. Finally, we need to make sure that our first responders and local recovery groups like CURV here in our region and NECO and other partners are resourced enough when it comes to looking at how to, to support community members after climate events like this most recent flooding. And lastly, I think we want to encourage towns and incentivize them to create resiliency plans and to make sure that they're prepared again at the local level for these events that will be ahead of us soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. The next question is also from the League. The candidates did not receive it in advance. How does Vermont provide quality education for all students, given rising costs, needed capital improvements, and the decrease in student population? And Amanda, you're first on this one.
Thank you for this question. This is a very important issue of this race. Our schools are so important, and our children's education is essential to a community's vibrancy, right? It's so important that we do it well. But our small state doesn't have unlimited funds. You know, we can't keep up with the skyrocketing property taxes, and the current plan just isn't sustainable. There's been a long road to get where we are related to education finance. And Mr. Beck has worked on this issue for over his tenure in the House of Representatives. And I think even he will tell you that there's been many well-intentioned missteps by the legislature along the way to get where we are today. I think we're facing such a complex challenge. It's best to call in the experts, look at best practices from similar states, and move forward with systemic change. If elected, I would listen to the Commission on the Future of Public Education, and I would listen to their recommendation and advocate for a straightforward and easy to understand funding formula so that a kid maybe could explain it to you, that it values fairness and that community members could be able, like I said, to understand it, and that local decisions would have a clear impact on property tax. And that we add cost containment measures that address these rising expenses that are driving up costs. For example, non-academic expenses such as mental health could potentially be sourced through other community-based means, as could capital expenditures that I know that's being investigated now. I would continue wanting to see that sourced differently than it is now. As your senator, I will offer a fresh perspective on education financing. Being from the majority party, I can advocate more effectively for our region, pushing for a balanced approach that controls spending while ensuring quality education. Overall, we need to adjust incentives and establish better safeguards to ensure our schools operate efficiently and effectively so that all of our children have the opportunity to thrive.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott?
Thank you. Education is so important to our children in our state, and we need to have an excellent education system. Nobody disagrees on that. The question is, how do we provide an excellent education that Vermont can afford? Right now, we are nipping right at the heels of New Jersey for being the most expensive state in the country, and we have crumbling schools. And, why is that? Well, basically what's happened is we have an enormous transparency problem in the education fund. Districts, when they put together budgets, they don't understand the tax implications of their decisions. Voters don't understand the implications of their decisions when they vote on budgets. And then even when they do understand, they know what they vote for their rate, nobody understands how their taxes get determined. Is it property? Is it income? Is it both? There's all kinds of caps, thresholds, you name it. There are only three things you have to do to the education fund to make it perform correctly and so that Vermonters can understand it. Three things. One, I accomplished this year. Got it out in 3 weeks, spent a month down in the Senate and got it through, and that's common level of appraisal reform. That will cure a lot of the problem. The other part of the problem is that districts are disconnected from, their district spending decision is too disconnected from the local tax rate that people pay, about 30 cents on the dollar. That can be easily fixed by defining education spending as the amount of money that homestead taxpayers pay across the state. Done. Last thing you need to do so people can understand it, property tax credit reform. Just do it like every other state in the country does it. You pay a property tax bill, and then you get an income tax credit at your filing. Clear. Everybody knows. 3 turns of the screwdriver. We've done one. I made that happen this year. 2 more that can easily happen next year. And then this thing will perform like it's supposed to, and everybody can understand it.
Thank you, Scott. The next question is one that was along the same theme, dealing with education, but this is one that was emailed in ahead of time. And Scott will be first on this question. School spending has escalated far beyond inflation and far beyond the cost of health insurance. Overhead at the state level and reduced local control has taken a large amount of tax dollars away from the actual classroom. Do you feel that the bureaucratic oversight of the education system should be reviewed for cost-saving measures? Again, Scott's first on this.
No. Our Agency of Education absolutely got obliterated after the 2008 recession. And they lost all of their people that were supposed to be going out and checking in on our public schools and making sure kids were getting an excellent education. And we need to build back the Agency of Education, not reduce it further. Most of the people there, they can't help kids. They can't help public schools because they're all on federal grants. And the federal grants don't allow them to do that. So we need to find room in the budget. In the Agency of Education is paid out of the general fund. It's not paid out of the education fund. So the Agency of Education isn't even a factor when determining the tax rates on the bills that you all are getting here pretty soon. We need to find room in the budget to build back AOE so we can get people that are qualified to check on schools and to make sure that kids are getting a quality education back in the schools. That's one of our biggest problems is nobody's checking on our public schools. So I would say no, we don't need to cut that bureaucracy. We need to build it back and get the quality up in our schools and find the resources in the general fund to pay for that.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda?
Thank you. Yeah, look, as I said in my opening remarks, being financially sound is really important, and I think any agency should make sure that, there's not extra kind of laying around there. Having said that, I think it's pretty clear that the Agency of Education needs to be strong here in our state. What does that mean for their bottom line? I'm not sure, but I think when you look at as it's been said already today, money has been going into our education system, and our outcomes have remained pretty stagnant. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that is. COVID is one of them. Lots of challenges going on in communities that are contributing to that stagnation, but it's still true. And so how do we equip our schools, our educators, with the best in what's available related to education? And I think that's by making sure, we have a strong agency of education that understands how to increase learning and curriculum development in all the ways that are evidence-based and can get us where we need to go with our kids in their education in our community. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. I want to comment that the two candidates are doing a good job of following the rules. We've given them a 2-minute limit, and they've been sticking to that very closely. We don't have control over their mics. They have control over them themselves. So the next question, and see, this will be Amanda first on this, is about housing. Got 2 versions of it so far, so put these together. What housing policies need to change in Vermont to ensure affordability for residents? And the second one, how do you plan to improve the housing? How do you plan to tackle the housing problem in St. Johnsbury? And that really needs to be addressed beyond St. Johnsbury. So how do you deal with the issue of affordability in housing?
Okay, well, I think many of us here know that our region has been in a housing crisis for some time, if not the whole state. And businesses and organizations can't thrive if they can't, encourage people to, come here and live here and have a home. That ends up, really hurting all sorts of sectors, including the healthcare sector that needs a lot of folks to be able to come and move and take care of our people, as well as in manufacturing, which there was a recent, as I think many of you have probably read the article in the Caledonia Record about the manufacturing roundtable that was here and where people need housing. Okay, this is a big problem. I think it's important to have, there are some great opportunities in St. Johnsbury that are already happening. So on Railroad Street, I know many of you know the Northern Forest housing units that are going in. Those are market rate housing. We need to make sure that our towns have market rate housing as well as affordable housing. Continuing to partner with organizations like Rural Edge in our area to increase affordable housing units. They are doing that really well. It doesn't happen overnight, but there's a lot of new units coming online thanks to their leadership, and I would continue to support that with tax credits and whatever is needed to encourage that kind of development. So we need a mix. We need affordable housing units, absolutely, and we also need market rate housing, particularly in downtowns, right, where people can move in, young folks can stay here after they graduate, they can come back after they went to college, find housing units that work for them, where they can walk to local restaurants, especially in places like St. Johnsbury. Not all of our towns are like that, where there's restaurants you can walk to, but here there is. And so how can we really create that density, which is great for economic development, and it's also great for our climate, right? Having folks that don't have to drive everywhere all the time, right? They can hop on their bikes and get to local amenities. So I think those 2 pieces are really supporting the affordable housing like Rural Edge and encouraging their development, as well as looking at market rate housing improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott?
I think, anytime you're trying to solve a problem in Montpelier, I think it's really important for everybody at the table to back away from the table and look at each other and say, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? And the problem we're trying to solve is housing is too expensive. And a lot of times we think the answer to that is to pour more money into the system, federal, state, whatever. And if we have a housing system and a supply and demand that's not functioning correctly, and we just pour money into the system, the price of housing doesn't come down. It goes up. And that's okay, if we're doing apartment projects that are coming in at $450,000 an apartment, and it's all subsidized, and somebody is fortunate enough to qualify for that, and they get that apartment. But everybody else that doesn't qualify, the price of all their housing just went through the roof. And so we need to be smarter about how we try to fix the housing market than just dump money into it. In my committee this year, there was a plan to dump $900 million into it. And, you know, it just fuels the market. Everything gets even more expensive, and it doesn't get the effect that you want it to get. We want housing to be less expensive for everybody, not just the people that qualify, but everybody, especially those young families that need that starter home to get started and get out from under, you know, paying $1,400 rent every month, and it doesn't go towards anything. So I think, you know, private public partnerships are important, but we need to deploy money in a way to make the cost of housing less expensive. We can reduce regulation, population density, and mass production all helps, but we have to focus on the problem, which is make housing less expensive for everybody.
Thank you, Scott. The next question deals with housing from a different perspective. We received a couple questions from the audience about homelessness. So Scott will be first on this question. People are unhoused with mental illness and some with substance abuse disorder. How do you propose to help them? So Scott first.
Thank you. You know, I think there's the state knows of 180 people in this 3-county area that are housing insecure, and that's a lot. And there's a lot of complicating layers to that. You mentioned mental health, those that are struggling with substance abuse. I think we start with what works. And what seems to be working in this area, at least from what I've seen, is we finally have a 12-month permanent shelter out there in East St. Johnsbury that's doing a really good job of bringing people in that find themselves in a situation where they don't have a home, stabilizing them, getting them to stable, secure housing. And I think that's our bedrock right now. That's working. We need to continue with that. The other layers, of course, can make that more complicated, especially those that are involved in substance use. It is really difficult for a shelter like we operate to deal with that situation. I think, you know, when I think of all the problems that we face, it's public safety, housing, law enforcement, it's not solvable unless we solve this substance use problem. The police aren't going to be effective if drugs are coming through this town. And so, you know, I think the big question is how do you solve that substance use problem? And I think wraparound services are very important. We have the beds, we have the treatment facilities, but we need to give these people the support services and the wraparounds so that they'll commit to getting clean, coming in, getting treatment, and if there is a relapse, that they'll come back in for treatment. But I think that we need to solve addiction, and we've got a great base, a bedrock out there in East St. Johnsbury to help them when they've figured that out.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda?
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. At Umbrella, we operate a shelter program that supports survivors of domestic violence. So they are fleeing domestic or sexual violence, but they're often housed very precariously, and often they are from the unhoused population. Last year, we served about 85 adults and children within our apartment-based shelters. And so I think the apartment approach can be really effective in supporting people who are dealing with homelessness. And so looking at, instead of the motel pool piece or going to motels, that's really expensive. It's $80 a night. Whereas if you rent an apartment and people can have access to a kitchen, they can have access to that home-like feeling, especially for kids, it can really help and be much cheaper as well. And so Umbrella has lifted that up, and a lot of other organizations also do that to support the homeless population. Having a permanent shelter with NECA running it is absolutely essential to all of our communities. approaches to homelessness. We need to have those in all of our communities that are densely populated and have this need. I think that's something that we need to also think about is how we're integrating services. So what we find at Umbrella, for example, in the shelter that we operate, is that many people are experiencing substance misuse as well. Maybe 75% of folks coming to our shelter are dealing with that. And so we've started to partner with our local recovery centers and others to bring services to them within the home setting so they're able to be better integrated into what we're already providing them with a safe place to live. And so really thinking about how we can get at some of these root causes of homelessness, including substance abuse and mental health and other traumas that folks have experienced so that they can get what they need while they're being housed. And then we can work with them to support other transitional housing programs and other permanent housing solutions for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. A related question, and you've each addressed this partially, and Amanda will be first on this next one. As a retired RN, I am aware that recovering from fentanyl addiction can take 5, 6, 7 or more attempts. Since fentanyl addiction is a big part of public safety concern, what can the legislature do to provide more resources for addiction recovery? Is it doing enough now? Amanda first.
I think we're all seeing this issue really balloon here. There was the opioid crisis, and now it's continuing, and now fentanyl is really the main substance that we're combating here. I think there's important aspects of this work that needs to happen. We need to take a human-centered approach. We can't look at this like they did in the 80s and talk about war on drugs and all of this stuff. We have to really look at a human-centered approach and think about solutions based on why are people numbing themselves? What's going on behind the scenes there? And that's why in continuing to have support a legislature that provides funding and resources to prevention is essential. Umbrella, where I'm the director, we've been doing a lot of substance misuse prevention, running a coalition in Newport area, because it really takes a community to look at preventing this very, very important issue. So I think we need to continue to lift up, like I said, a human-centered approach that also focuses on peer-based interventions. Research says that the best way to combat this issue and to support people is by having folks who have been there themselves help the people get the help that they need. This is especially true for women, where things like sex trafficking happen, and they happen here. And so hearing from somebody who's been through that, who has experienced that kind of trauma, is essential in how we approach our responses. But we do need to continue to make sure we have enough beds, make sure we have enough recovery centers that are strong and funded and vital in our communities, because those kinds of settings where peers can really take the lead on supporting people who are experiencing substance misuse really work the best. Working with municipalities and other community agencies to actually go where folks are encamped, go where people are, to reach out to them, to not say, come with me, you're getting arrested, nothing like that, but to say, hey, I can relate to you on this other level, and let me support you in your journey to hopefully get healthy.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott?
Thank you. I don't believe that the problem is resources. The Vermont legislature, we have, the resources are there to treat our population that is struggling with substance use. So that's the good news. But everybody that struggles with these drugs, including fentanyl, they have their own story, and we need to figure out what that story is, and figure out what makes them tick and makes them want to get into treatment, because that is, from what I understand, that is the biggest thing. I mean, if somebody has to want to get into treatment, and they have to want to get well, if that's not true, then your chances of success are very small. And so that's what going back to my earlier answer, I think it's really important that these people that struggle, that they know that there are wraparound services, and that people are going to be with them all along the way through that 5th, 6th, or 7th relapse. And for some of them, it's a multi-year journey. I ran into a gentleman up in Hardwick last weekend that's recovered, but has been struggling with it for 7 years. And he is getting into the coaching, and he feels like he's really making a difference up there in Hardwick, and I think he likely is. But you know, this is going to be a really long, hard slog. We also need to, I agree that we cannot arrest our way out of this, especially as it pertains to those that are struggling with this stuff. But we need to get tough with the people that are dealing it and that are running it up here and bringing it in. We have to get tough with them, and we have to do whatever reforms we need to do within the system to make sure that this is not an easy place for them to get into and to deal with this stuff.
Thank you, Scott. The next question, Scott, is addressed directly to you. But Amanda, you'll have an opportunity to respond afterwards if you would like to. The audience member asks why you did not vote for H27, an act related to coercive controlling behavior and abuse prevention orders.
House Bill 27, can you say it again?
Yeah, House 27, yeah. An act related to coercive controlling behavior and abusive prevention orders.
Okay, I mean, I don't really recall that bill. It sounds like it, was it from this last session? It would have been pretty early with the number.
I don't recall the bill either, but.
Yeah. Is the person that asked it, are they here? Would they like to give some?
It is someone here, but they may or may not want to.
Yeah, I mean, we vote on hundreds and hundreds of bills every year, and some of them are more contentious than others, but.
Okay, we could.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, honestly, we vote on hundreds of bills every year. Some of them are by voice, some of them are by roll call, and yeah, if they'd like to
yeah,
meet later.
I get that. Amanda, did you want to say something?
Can you just say that again, the question?
The audience member called it H27, an act related to coercive controlling behavior and abuse prevention orders.
I'm actually familiar with that because the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence was advocating strongly for that this year, and it actually passed. So it's basically an order that allows for in relief from abuse situations. So when somebody is experiencing domestic violence and they want to go and get a relief from abuse, so a restraining order. You've heard that before, and so what this bill does is it makes it allowable and available for people who are have experienced controlling isolation, things. It doesn't have to be physical violence. It can be a different kind of coercive control that will allow them to get this civil restraining order, so it's not criminal, but allows them and their family to be safe. So it's called coercive control, and they've added that, and we're actually at Umbrella, we're already using it. So we're using it to support people as they make their choices related to if they would like to pursue a relief from abuse order. They now have more access to do that because they're able to cite controlling behaviors and manipulation and a lot more nuanced kinds of behavior that we know is linked to escalation of violence. So we were really happy to see that passed this session, so I definitely know what that is.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott, did you want to say any more about that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It was a while ago, and I'd have to go back and look at the details of it and read the
Okay.
bill. I'm sure there was, if I voted no on it, there was a reason
I don't know if people can hear you, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to. So we take hundreds and hundreds of votes, and I would. I think I did vote no. I looked up the record real quick, but what was in the bill that I objected to, I'd have to go back and look. A lot of times there's a lot of things in a bill that you like. There's a lot of things in a bill you don't like, and so you weigh in, and that's just the way it goes in a legislature. So I'd have to look back at it and see what I found objectionable and to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you both. So We'll go with Amanda first on this one. This is back to housing. Temporary or speculative housing, like Airbnb, are a massive part of what is driving up Vermont housing costs. What do you plan to do about non-residential outsiders who drive up housing costs in that way?
Thank you for the question. I do understand that there is this conflict between kind of having available homes that people can rent and apartments that people can rent, and the other side of it where there isn't any availability there. But we also see that people, they have homes and they want to rent them out, and they kind of want to do it at their own way. And Airbnb is really convenient for them. It can be a real moneymaker for some. But there are folks that do that in a little more of a speculative manner, and kind of come and purchase places, probably less so in our particular district, but probably there are places. I don't know, I'd have to look into it more. But that can be really problematic where it's, there's not even a homeowner there, or they're really removed themselves from the whole thing. And so, I think there are communities that have looked at this and made changes on a municipality by municipality basis. I would encourage that. I think that that's probably the best approach to do any kind of regulation about that. I think is really a local issue. I know there's been some work here in St. Johnsbury. I don't know all the detail about it, but I know that was a topic of concern here. So, in terms of how we regulate that, I think we're a small enough state and a diverse enough state that we probably don't need to do that on the state level. I would say that's really a town by town decision on how we look at these rental units.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott?
The legislature did chose not to have a one-size-fits-all policy on this, to not have a blanket state policy that applies to all Airbnb short-term rentals, and we left it to the towns to decide for themselves, because there's a wide variety of towns that are trying to figure this whole situation out. Stowe is very different from St. Johnsbury, for example. But I think, in a bigger picture, as the legislature, we're probably not the people to make a decision right now, because we don't really, this industry is evolving so quickly that I think a lot of people don't even really understand it. We took a lot of testimony this year because the legislature, not with my vote, decided to put a 3% STR tax, a short-term rental tax, on people that rent out. And so we took a lot of testimony, and there's two things that really stood out for me for that testimony. One is 94% of short-term rental units in the state of Vermont, that is the only short-term rental unit that the owner owns. It's a one-off, okay? It's a lot of people that are renting out a bedroom, a place above the garage, or a cabin in the backyard. And I received, I bet a couple hundred emails from STR owners all across the state. They're really well written, all very personal. And this is what they all said when we were talking about putting a 3% tax on them. You gotta be kidding me. I'm only renting out a room so I can make a few dollars so I can pay my property taxes. And now you're gonna put a 3% tax on me? So we don't even understand this industry yet. And it's different in every town. So I think for now it's probably best that we leave it on a town-by-town basis.
Thank you, Scott. The next question, we'll go to Scott first. For the coming term, we will see an unusual amount of turnover in the Senate. And if you are elected, you will be one of the new members. How will the influx of new senators affect the efficiency, productivity, and actions of the Senate? And how will you fit in as one of the new members? Scott first.
Well, how it all sugars off and how it all goes, it depends on who gets elected, right? And not all the senators that think they want to return may return. Some may not win re-election. So it's a new crop every year. Right now I know every senator. I've worked with many of them. I know where I can work with them. I know where we're probably going to be opposed. I'm ready to go. no matter who's in that building. I've worked with all of them. Sometimes, depending on where bills are and what I have to do, I spend as much time down there in the Senate as I do up in the House. So I feel very confident that I'm ready to go in there. I say I know all the players. The pro tem we get along really, really well. The people on the corresponding committees in Senate Finance and House Education, I think they have a lot of respect for me. They want to know what my opinions are on a lot of these things, and on a lot of things they rely on me for my expertise. For me, I think it'll be pretty seamless. As far as the whole body, it depends on who comes in, and we don't know who the people are going to be. Sometimes people come into politics in the legislature, and they struggle. Like they can't, takes you a term or two, or maybe longer to get your legs. And this year, in the Senate, I honestly say there were some of those people that had trouble finding their legs, and I'm sure there will be people next year that will be the same. But it's not something I'm worried about. I've been down there a lot. I know them all, and like I said, I know where I can work with them. I know where we disagree. I know where I need to oppose them to protect this district, and I think I'm ready to go.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda?
Thank you. So I haven't been there. I think that's not a secret. I visited a bunch, and I think it's very, the lunch is great. Cafeteria is excellent. But, of course, right, I haven't been there. However, I think that coming from, learning from Jane Kitchell in the very small amount of time that I've had, but I've been able to understand is that being a moderate in the majority party is powerful. Being a voice that can really speak to folks that are in the majority party, and no matter what happens in this election throughout the state, Democrats will be in the majority party, okay? We're in Vermont after all, I know. But seriously, I think it's important that we have a strong and moderate voice to be able to really speak to our needs here in our region. And many, like Jane, who have been moderate senators, are not coming back. So not only will folks be new, but we won't necessarily know if, where they stand kind of on the Democrats, spectrum. And I think that I've found that people who are, I think it's really important to work across the aisle and would do that for sure. And I think that is really important. It's also really important to do some advocating within your own party. And I expect that would be a big part of my role, is really representing the NEK in our Caledonia district in the State House, and doing that with fellow legislators who maybe we can relate on different job experiences that we've had, or maybe we've worked in different kinds of sectors, and so we can maybe relate in a way that would be arguably more effective than having me be on the minority party. So that's kind of my perspective, and why I think that even though I haven't been in the State House as a legislator, I think I could really start at a pretty strong place. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. A quick note, the two of you sound great in the room to me. Do they sound, everybody hear them well? So the camera person asked if you would speak more directly into the microphone. So I guess the camera's not picking you up as clearly as the rest of us are. So the next question, you've addressed this already. I'll ask the beginning of this question. Jane Kitchell's retirement leaves very large shoes to fill. As a Northeast Kingdomer, she has brought millions of dollars to our local community. She has worked tirelessly across the aisle to formulate policies and budgets that help all people, Republican, Democrat, or progressive. Will you support this philosophy of governance if you are elected? The rest of the question gets a little more pointed. I'm going to leave it as a general question for each of you, starting with Amanda.
In summary, it's like?
It's about working across the aisle for Republicans, Democrats, and progressives on policies and budgets.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that goes without saying, or it should. You know, we're in a very small state, and I think it's even more important that we don't fall into the kind of national issues related to partisanship and, you know, pointing fingers, and this one's, you know, evil incarnate, and this one isn't. I think, you know, that doesn't get us anywhere, and I think we have the opportunity, again, here in Vermont, to be able to actually solve problems together. I think that's something that we need to do. We share a lot of values. You know, when you think about impacts of issues like climate change, for example, right? We all will experience those impacts no matter what political stripe we come from. So it's really important that we work together to come up with solutions. I know that can be challenging because people do feel dug in, right? They are taking cues from, you know, Fox News and CNBC and, you know, whatever they listen to most. And I think it's really essential that we step outside of that and solve problems. That's why I'm interested in being part of this this escapade, right, is to solve problems. I'm not doing this because I, you know, love one color more than the other. It's really about working together to solve problems that have been facing us for a really long time. So I could go on, but I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott?
Okay, thank you. Make sure I'm in more to the mic. It's very important to be nonpartisan and to work across the aisle because, you know, that's where the middle is, that's where most Vermonters are. You know, I think Montpelier's a lot more partisan than people think it is. We like to believe that, oh, it's Vermont, and it's partisan. It's a partisan building. There are a lot of people in that building that are trying to gather 51% of the vote on one side of the political spectrum. And then there are a few that are trying to build the middle, that 2/3 in the middle, that 75% in the middle. I'm proud to say that that's where I've been for 10 years. So I have a lot of, you know, I've done it. I've been there. I've worked with people across the aisle. You also have to be strong too, though. You know, sometimes you have to walk away, right? This last session was a classic example. Tried to work with the other party on education funding reform and property tax rates. And eventually we just had to walk away. Whoever the most moderate Democratic senator is, voted for a 14% average statewide property tax increase with no reform to the education system. Had to walk away. Can't go there with you. Clean heat standard. $17 billion for people that still have to heat their homes with carbon fuel. Really would have liked to work with them on that. Had to walk away. We can't afford $17 billion. Whoever the moderate Democratic senators are, they voted for that. Renewable energy standard moves up our goals by 3 years. That'll cost ratepayers $1 billion. Vermonters $1 billion. Tried to work with Vermonters on the other party on that. Every moderate Democratic senator voted for that. So sometimes you have to walk away. You can only be so partisan. You can only be so nonpartisan or bipartisan. At some point, you have to do what's best for Vermonters. And that looks a little ugly sometimes, and it looks partisan. But you know, when I'm over there, I'm there to represent Vermonters.
Thank you, Scott. The next question will go to Scott first. This potentially has 6 parts, so I'm not sure you can answer the entire question. So address the topic. I don't think you can possibly do all the specifics. Well, you'll see what I mean when I read it. So again, this will go to Scott first. What are the top 3 policy positions of Governor Scott that you disagree with? What are the top 3 policy positions of Governor Scott that you agree with? So I'm not sure you can do 3 and 3, but.
Well, I don't know if I'll get 3 and 3, but I'll try to answer your question as best I can. Governor Scott and I, we usually do align on a lot of different policy issues. I'd say that, probably the biggest difference between he and I are more in style. Governor Scott is a little more of a stay back, wait for the conversation to evolve. And that might be partly because he's the governor and he's waiting for the legislative process to finish before he weighs in. Myself, I'm a little more like at that first meeting, our second meeting, where we're trying to solve a problem, I want to be right in there throwing solutions and on the table to be discussed, and trying to work through those and fix things, and be out in front. And so I think from a style standpoint, we do tend to approach things a little differently. That might be just because of his role as the executive and I'm in the legislative branch. From a policy standpoint, we haven't disagreed with very much over the years. I did buck him on a couple of different veto votes. We have a difference of opinion on whether non-citizen permanent residents should be able to vote in Vermont. And my position is that a permanent resident should be able to vote in Vermont, regardless of their citizenship. They pay taxes, their kids go to schools. I mean, they're in for all of this, all these decisions. So that's one issue where we have parted ways in the past. I think the governor's objection to that is more one of consistency, but I've been willing to let different towns do that on their own if that's what the voters in that town want. And I'd say that's probably the biggest policy difference that we've had over the years.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda?
Thank you. If I could just quickly go back to the Affordable Heat Act piece, I think when we start talking about numbers, I think it's important for voters to understand that we don't know those numbers yet. There's a study that's coming out about that. We should see it soon, but we don't have all the facts, and I just think it's important for people to have the opportunity to go back after this and look into that more. In terms of Governor Scott, I'd say I think the yield bill this year, right? I'm not going to go into all of the details about it, but the fact that he vetoed it, I think in his solution to kind of address the increases of property taxes that we were to see, was to really kick the can down the pike, so to speak. It's not saving anybody, profoundly to really wait on those bills going up. They're going to come, we have to come to pay at some point. And so kicking it down the line, I think, was the wrong approach. I think it was political. And I think it was not something that I was, excited to see him do. However, throughout the years, I have seen that he has been in office. I have seen a lot of moderation and a lot of working across the aisle. Some of that has altered a little bit in the past several years, but I have appreciated that about him.
Thank you, Amanda. And the next question will go to Amanda first. This is for both of you. Do you receive any campaign funds from out of state or out of country? If so, why and under what obligations?
Oh, I'm going first. Yes. So I wish I received a little bit more campaign funds, hint, hint. There's a way you can help out after if you click that button. No, but we have received some out of district support. We've received some out of state. I will tell you, a lot of it has been like oh, remember I worked with them and, such and such a place, or somebody I went to college with, or a family member. A lot of that out of state for me has been kind of folks I've known. And I think they really have no stake at all in Vermont politics besides being really good supporters of me as a person. And I think that's all I would say about that. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Amanda. Scott?
I have not received any campaign contributions from out of the country. I have received some from out of state. I'm not even sure out of the country is legal, but I haven't. I have received some from out of state. As far as obligations, I mean, I have a 10-year voting record, and anybody who didn't make a public request for campaign donations this election cycle. Everybody that has donated to me, they know what my voting record is. They know what I support and what I don't support, and if it lines up with what their goals are, then maybe they're inclined to support me. But I mean, I have no obligations. I mean, I've never, in 10 years, I've never received a campaign contribution from anybody in any election where there was an expectation of a vote or, you know, taking a position to their, I mean, they give me money, send money because they like my voting record and they think I have similar goals than what they do. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Scott. And this question will go to Scott first. It's about healthcare. The path we are on with healthcare taking so great a portion of our economy is not sustainable. We have just spent a lot of money gathering information statewide, supposedly to transform our healthcare system to improve access, affordability, quality, and sustainability. What kind of transformation do you think is necessary to achieve these goals? What do you think the legislature should do to try to move us in that direction? Scott first.
Okay, thank you. Sean Tester should be up here to answer this question, but he's not. You know, I went to the healthcare forum that was over in Catamount Arts a couple weeks ago that Sean put together, and you know, I think what the legislature can do, I think we see is a lack of competition in this state for health insurance. I think that could definitely be a piece. But I think, you know, and we haven't talked about this at all tonight, but it is like the big umbrella in this state that is making everything that we're trying to do much more difficult than it needs to be, including healthcare. And that is the age demographics of this state. I mean, you know, I think Sean and Mike over at Northern Counties, I think they are terribly innovative. They have been terribly innovative for a very long time. And you look at them financially, they're one of the best financial hospitals in the state of Vermont. I mean, they're doing better than others. But boy, when your average age keeps getting, you know, keeps creeping up, we can't cheat Father Time. You know, people as they get older, they require more visits, more procedures, more everything. And I think that is the headwind that our hospitals and our medical providers are facing. We can do something about that as a legislature. You know, reducing the tax burden, housing, so that young families can move here and get that average age to come down. But I think that's the biggest thing that we can do as a legislature to try to fix the cost of health care and a lot of these other problems, is we really have to make Vermont a state where young people can come to and young families can come to and get the average age of people in this state lower. No offense to all the people that are above the average age, I am too, but we need young people.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda?
Scott's right. We are old, and that is a driver, certainly, of the healthcare costs that we see. You know, hey, I believe healthcare is a human right? I mean, I think we should all have healthcare so that we can be there and watch our kids grow up, so that we can, you know, have what we need to live vital lives and be mobile and get around. Preventive health care is so essential to that. Not just the hospital care, right, that we get when things go really wrong, but all that preventive care that goes before that. You know, when I started at Umbrella, they didn't have health insurance, and I couldn't believe it. But, you know, after working and saving money and doing what we needed to do, we were able to get health insurance for folks. And what's been really remarkable is as people start getting health insurance, you know, they start to be able to really address some underlying issues that have been happening for them, and you can see their lives really begin to improve. That is if they caught it soon enough. Otherwise, you really are facing chronic illness that can be really debilitating. But in terms of how we drive those costs down, I think, one approach is really to look at you can ask my husband, he's a family doctor and a doctor now at NVRH. There's so much paperwork. We have made the system so complex. We have ACOs, we have Green Mountain Care Board, we have insurance companies. We are asking our professionals who know how to take care of people, and we're asking them to spend their time filling out paperwork and checking boxes. Okay, we're really wasting that resource, and we're doing that really inefficiently across the state and throughout this system. This is a national problem, not just a local problem, but I think there are fixes here that can really address that bloat of administration and of paper pushing that is encouraged, so that we can get back to our providers providing patient care, which is what they are trained to do, what they love to do, and what we need them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So, Amanda, this question will go to you first. Would you support a school voucher system? Why or why not? And related to that, what metric would you use to determine if a school is successful or failing? And I think that is meant to be connected to the voucher system.
Yeah, okay, so the school, issue here, and especially in our little neck of the woods, is really, this is a vital question for us to consider. I have 3 kids, as I mentioned before. One of them goes to the academy. The 3 of them went to the St. Johnsbury school. I love public school. I'm all for it. I went to public school. My husband went to public school. We need vibrant public schools. But here in our region, and in this particular town of St. Johnsbury, it's really important that, I could just think of kids who graduated with my older son who have, gone on to the academy, and they are thriving there. They are getting life-changing experiences there that everybody deserves and should have, right? And so in our region, in our area here in the Northeast Kingdom, in our Caledonia district, we need to come up, and I think as a legislator, we need to look at communities town by town. And we can't just say universally, we have to have some particular system. I think we need to allow for situations like we have here in St. Johnsbury. And I think we also need to allow other school districts to do what they need to do to educate their children. That's going to look different in Danville. It's going to look different in Hardwick. But I think we need to take it in our rural state as a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott?
I just want to clarify the question. What Amanda's talking about is a public tuition system, which is what we have in Vermont, which is where a school district can decide to operate a public school or tuition their kids out to any independent school or public school. In the case of St. Johnsbury has decided to operate a K through 8 and tuition 9 through 12. Okay. The question is do we support a school voucher system? No. A school voucher system is a completely different animal. A school voucher system is a system whereby parents or kids can be pulled out of public schools and the district sends money to whatever school they choose. And there are states that have done this around the nation, and what it does is it hollows out public schools. So no, I don't support a voucher system. That's a really, I don't support that at all. I do support the public tuition system that we have in Vermont, where each district gets to choose for itself how they do things. So,
Thank you, Scott. We have a couple more questions, and then we'll be getting to closing statements. I'm sorry, we're not going to get to every one of the questions that people wrote. So, Scott, this question is directed to you, and I guess that's one of the benefits of being in office already. Almost 70% of Republicans believe the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. As a Republican, will you renounce the big lie and state publicly that President Biden was a legitimately elected president?
I guess whoever submitted that question hasn't been around here for very long. The 2020 election was a free and fair election. 70 courts have determined that to be true, and I was outspoken to that effect in 2020, and so all I have
Thank
to
you.
say. Yeah.
Amanda, do you
My
agree?
redirection
No.
is now you know how I feel about the tuition program, and I too do not support the voucher system.
Okay, thank you both. So, first to Amanda. What do you think Vermont is rated, why do you think Vermont is rated as one of the least business-friendly states in the country? So Amanda, then Scott.
I would like to know what that comes from, so I think it's important to not make assumptions that that's accurate. I believe that whoever wrote it, had a viable reason to say that. But we're a rural state. There's not a lot of us, and I can imagine that it would be, not necessarily on someone's list to say, okay, we're going to put up a humongous, Amazon warehouse that's going to need hundreds and hundreds of staff. This is the place to go. Well, I bet that study found that people said Vermont is not one of them, friend. So, I think we need to consider the sources on some of these things. I think there's a lot of benefits for companies that are looking to invest in Vermont. Some we should, I think, as a legislature and as a state, make more inviting, more enticing for companies to come here. We certainly have an excellent quality of life. We have access to some of the most beautiful environments that are around in our state for people's employees to enjoy. So I think it depends on the type of business that you're talking about or that study referred to. I think that Vermont can be a very a place that people want to invest business. And look, we also have some really exciting things that could happen in our state related to renewable energy and green energy and different kinds of niche industries, including tourism, et cetera, that could be really even more capitalized on if there was the right climate in place to do that. So I disagree with your study, and I'd love to see where it comes from so I can understand what was behind it.
Thank you, Amanda. Scott?
Most of the studies that I've seen, Vermont ranks, somewhere in the bottom half to bottom third of business-friendly states. And I think business-friendly is dependent on industry. What are you in? I mean, if you're somebody that sells high, expensive goods, this side of the river is not a great place to be. But I think it is dependent on industry. But our property taxes are very high, and that's a big factor for business. Our regulation, there's an adage that go build it on the other side of the river. It'll be $100,000 less in permitting, and you'll get it done a year quicker than you will in Vermont. And people, I think it's probably true. So I wouldn't say we're unfriendly, but we could be friendlier. One of the things I'm most proud of my time in House Ways and Means, and it took 4 years, which is legislative time, that's kind of quick, is I reformed the corporate income tax. And the net effect of that is that we took the tax burden off of corporations operating in Vermont that sell almost all of their goods out of Vermont. Think Weidman, okay? Basically eliminated their income tax liability, and we shifted it to corporations that operate outside of Vermont, but do a tremendous amount of business, have a tremendous amount of business activity in Vermont. Okay, think Comcast or something like that. The net effect of that is that we were able to, with that bill, eliminated the corporate income tax liability for Weidman, and the net of shifting it on to the other corporations outside the state was we tripled corporate income tax revenue, okay, which goes to serve Vermonters and solve their problems. So that's one way we made business more friendly in the state of Vermont, and
Okay.
I was glad to be a part of that.
Thank you, Scott. So one more question, and then we'll go to closing statements. And this will be first for Scott. What Senate committees interest you and why?
Well, my wheelhouse in the House has been House Education and Finance and Ways and Means, which is a tax writing committee. The corresponding committee in the Senate is finance. So that would be, I think, a logical place for me to go. The problem is the Senate has morning committees and afternoon committees, and education and finance both meet in the afternoon. So well, it's not my choice, but I obviously can't be on both. So I'm looking at the morning committees, and the morning committee that I think most interests me is transportation. I think that's terribly important to our economy, terribly important to the vitality of this state, and I have just a general interest in roads and bridges. I guess maybe I wanted to be a civil engineer at one point in my life, but didn't go down that route. But I think a transportation would be a good spot for me, and either education or Senate finance. If I had a crystal ball and I'd say, where would I end up? I think I'd probably end up in Senate finance because, education reform, tax reform is a huge thing. It will be a huge thing this year, and I have more knowledge of how that system works than anybody in the building. So it's probably where I'll end up.
Thank you. Scott? How about Amanda?
You can call me Scott. Just kidding. So, yeah, I think that, I don't know the exact name. I think it's Health and Human Services, but something, the committee that's related to that piece, I think that would probably be a committee I'd be interested in, given, where I've spent my career and, my interest in looking at how kind of our agency of human service programs that are supported by that agency, how they interrelate, where we could really dig in there around policies that impact communities and impact folks who are struggling or having difficulties in our community. So I think I could really thrive in that kind of committee. I could bring some knowledge and experience there to bear. And I think given my interest in, again, fiscal management and managing budgets and understanding the financial side of things, I got to go big or go home and say appropriations. Now, I don't think that they will put me in there necessarily as a senator in my first year, but maybe they would. And I think that it would be important to be on the appropriations committee to be able to really impact the bottom line, and to really look at how these different funding streams that are so important, how they're interrelated, and how we can, again, be more efficient in managing them.
Thank you, Amanda. So on to closing statements. And Scott, you get to go first.
Thank you for this evening's conversation and hospitality in this wonderful building. I believe that I'm very qualified to be Caledonia's next senator. I'm an educator, business owner, leader of nonprofits, and my 10 years of service in the House give me a wealth of policy expertise and knowledge. My legislative peers respect me and know that I am fair and work for consensus, but will push back when my district or Vermont is threatened. In the end, a Vermont Senate election is about choosing a candidate that is most prepared to represent all residents, recognizing that it is impossible to agree with everyone on all issues. As a representative, I have represented a House district that is very similar to the Caledonia Senate district, with equal numbers of people on all sides of the political spectrum. This is unique in Vermont and the rest of the country, where there is a lot of polarization and a continued migration toward districts that are increasingly like-minded. Representing a balanced district is fundamentally different. Instead of forming a consensus with one side of the district, a consensus has to be formed with the middle of the district, and then growing that middle as much as possible. This is not easy, but I have done it for 10 years. I not so jokingly tell people that I enjoy getting yelled at by both sides. The issues that Caledonia's next senator are likely to face will hit hard and fast in January. The clean heat standard will be up for activation in January. Education tax rates will again be a train wreck because reform was not passed in May. Those that would end school choice are at the gate and building alliances, and the flood recovery and resiliency will be front and center. I feel it is crucial that the person elected has a detailed understanding of a number of policies and the legislative process and existing relationships with the legislature, Governor Scott's administration, and supporting agencies. I feel that I am the right person for this job, and I would greatly appreciate your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda.
Thank you all for being here. It's really encouraging to see so many turn out tonight, so thank you, and thank you to the Athenaeum for hosting. I really look forward to to being able to bring the decades of experiences, developing solutions related to the various issues we've covered here tonight. I'm committed to working with others to develop viable solutions through listening, coalition building, and approaching challenges holistically. In this election, the stakes are high, and our decision about who we send to Montpelier matters more than ever. We need a strong advocate from the Caledonia district. Working at Umbrella and working on behalf of marginalized people, I know what it takes to speak on behalf of people who often feel at the fringe. And unfortunately, our region often feels that way. We often get left behind from Montpelier or Burlington, big ideas, and we need someone who can speak to that and who is accustomed to speaking to that. We also need new thinking. When I started my work at Umbrella, it had been, maybe 15 years since I was in the domestic and sexual violence field. In that time, not much had changed, and I'm really proud that we were able to bring in new ways of doing the work, including programming for people who've caused harm, and now we're making some inroads into that. It's important to bring people, it's important to represent new ideas into the State House. We also, again, need a moderate voice in the majority party. There's been a significant loss, as we've talked about, with moderate voices in the Democratic Party, in particular in the Senate, and we need common sense Democrats who would be able to shape bills, ensure that they really reflect our community's needs and values. Thank you again for your attention, your time. I'm available after this, or certainly after. You can reach out to me using my materials that are here in the space. Would love to connect with you and learn more, and I would, again, really value and appreciate your vote on November 5th as well.
Thank you, Amanda. So. You deserve a good applause. Before I turn this back over to Sue Reccanelli, I want to thank you as an audience for being so attentive. It's really been wonderful to look at your faces and to watch how focused people have been listening to our two candidates. And I want to thank our two candidates also. All of you together have made my job very easy. So here's Sue Reccanelli.
We are delighted that you've joined us here this evening, and we hope that the forum gave you the opportunity to learn more about your two candidates. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Vermont, I want to thank the candidates for their responses to a wide range of questions. I want to thank Kingdom Access Television for streaming and recording this forum, St. Johnsbury Athenaeum for graciously hosting us, our moderator Tom, our volunteers, and you, our audience, and our viewers, for your interest in this election. The League would like to remind you all to vote on Tuesday, November the 5th. You will receive your ballot no later than October the 1st. Be sure that you check online to see whether you are registered, because if you have moved or changed your name, you will need to re-register. You can vote. You can mail your ballot to your town clerk. You can drop it off at the ballot drop box or at your town clerk's office, or you can take your ballot to the polling station on election day. Every vote counts, and we know this to be the case in Vermont. So we urge you to make the effort, make a decision, make a difference. You will be well represented in Montpelier. Vote. Thank you for coming here today, and have a good night.